How often do you consider your relationship with yourself? Do we all have conversations with ourselves? How do we manage the dramas in our minds? Are we listening to the whispers of our bodies and our souls? This is Soul Mechanics, practical tune-ups to be a healthy human, and I'm your host, Kate Foley. How many of you think that exhibiting self-care is exclusively physical? I hear a lot of people tell me that they're going to go do some self-love by getting a pedicure and then going out for lunch. Then they return home to a turbulent and stale relationship that needles away at their core. Or they return to a job that feels stifling. Or they have a deep creative longing they're too afraid to pursue. Is that self-love? I think self-esteem, self-love, self-care, whatever you want to call it, resides in our choices. From choosing to walk in the forest to our perceptions when looking in the mirror. We choose what thoughts to indulge in, what people to invest our energy, and how to spend our time. Self-love is not about what we deserve. What do we even mean when we say we deserve something? Do I deserve chocolate and someone else doesn't? Does my neighbor deserve to have a tree fall on his house and I don't? The word deserve moves into entitlement if you think about it. Self-love is something completely different and far deeper than what we deserve. Caring for yourself takes the same amount of patience and understanding as a marriage. Some days you have no tolerance for your cravings and obsessions. What do you do with yourself on those days? Do you give in to them? Do you obstinately refuse to acknowledge them? Your relationship with yourself takes discipline and moderation. Saying no to the things that you resoundingly understand are not good for you is self-love, and that takes confidence. And how about instant gratification? Do you indulge in every whim or every impulse you have? If you're a parent, do you give in to your child's every desire? How do you think their adulthood will look? Do you think their expectations of the world will be realistic? It's the same with yourself. Self-confidence and self-esteem develop when you know and adhere to your own boundaries and limitations. Personally, I developed confidence and self-esteem when I began to trust my intuition. Now, when I say the word intuition, many people think this is some airy-fairy term that doesn't apply to everyone. But we are all intuitive, every single one of us. Some of the most intuitive people I know are people who are experts in their fields. These people have extensive knowledge about something, anything, so they can let go of their minds and allow their intuition to take over. The knowledge is their database, so to speak. After the knowledge is there, they feel their way toward what's right. What do I mean by feel? What's a feeling, after all? A feeling is what your body leans into. Our bodies will tell us where to go. This can happen through our five senses, or our stomachs, or our hearts, or our emotions. For me, my intuition is simply a knowing. It's not coming from my mind. Often, I feel it emanating from deep within my chest. I've spent a lot of time developing my intuition over the years. I've played with trusting it throughout my life until I grew to understand that my intuition is a very sophisticated system that I will never fully comprehend, but I ardently trust it. I've used my intuition many times as a runner. After all, our intuition has no bounds, seriously. We're tapping into the subconscious realm when we tap into our intuition. Ask a question and you'll always be led to the answer, but you have to be willing to accept the answer, even if it scares you, even if the path it leads you to looks dark and scary. This is where most people switch over to their rational minds and deviate from intuition, because they aren't given the answer they want or expect. To a linear person, intuition seems like a gamble. But for me, I'm not gambling when the answer is coming from within me. Years ago, I traveled to China with a group of martial artists from the US. I was just tagging along because it was a trip of a lifetime, We were staying in Beijing for a couple of days, and the group I was with walked to a nearby, albeit very fast, park to practice. I stayed back at the hotel for a bit, but then I decided to go for a run. I'd previously asked our group leader if it was a safe area for an American female to run, and he verbally gave me directions to a nearby park. He assured me it was completely safe, so I took off. I felt completely safe. I felt so safe that I kept running farther and farther because I kept stumbling upon beautiful ancient temples and walls. I ran past several groups of people practicing Tai Chi. There were more people gathered and walking that park than I'd ever seen in my life. Suddenly, a feeling came over me that I'd lost my way. I looked around and saw hundreds of people, but nothing was familiar. I started to panic. I felt really stupid for getting so carried away by my senses and excitement. A man stopped to help me because I clearly looked lost. But he didn't speak English, and I didn't speak anything but English. He obviously wanted to help, but we looked at each other after a couple of sentences and started laughing because it was so obvious I was out of my element. We waved goodbye, and he continued walking. I pulled myself together and thought, I gotta go with my gut. I had no other option. Did I ask a specific question? No. But the question was kind of obvious. I wanted to find my way back to the hotel, or to find my way to anyone familiar. So I just started walking. Every time the fear arose, I said no. I trust my body knows the way. I walked and walked and walked. It must have been 20 to 30 minutes of walking. It was hot and humid and getting hotter, and I was becoming dehydrated. Again, the fear began to rise. I acknowledged it. Again, but said, I trust my body. I kept walking and walking. Every time the fear surfaced, I said no. After a while, I started to enjoy the park. I started watching all the groups of people practicing Tai Chi, and I marveled at my circumstances. I was standing in Beijing. When would I ever have this opportunity again? I slowed my pace. I took a couple of deep, slow breaths, and I just walked as if I knew where I was going. Suddenly I looked up and I saw one of the people in my group doing Tai Chi in a small recessed stone amphitheater. I walked over to one of the guys I was friends with and he said, What are you doing over here? How did you get here? We must have walked a mile to get over here. I told him the story of how I got so utterly lost. He was shocked at how I found the group. I said, I used my intuition. He looked at me with one raised eyebrow in disbelief and started laughing at me. Because so many of us have lost a connection with our bodies, we don't trust our very own guidance. We've grown to trust our mental process and cognitions rather than our bodies. This is a recipe for confusion and division. The linear world never understands or supports the invisible world, but the invisible world will deliver every time. In my case in Beijing, it delivered me very safely into the arms of my beloved group. It did not deliver me back to the hotel, which was my conscious intention. But ultimately and subconsciously, I needed to be with the group. There was a series of events and conversations that happened after I found the group, in which I was glad to be a participant. We don't know the larger plan. We don't know what a conversation or a connection or a glance will bring to our future or past selves. That's intuition, plain and simple. The more you listen and trust your intuition to the T, the more self-love you are demonstrating. Self-love is in giving and receiving. If all you ever do is give to others, you'll quickly grow out of balance. You know the people who are always making excuses because they're needed by everyone and they feel selfish for tending to themselves? These people, men and women, need to be needed. They work tirelessly to help everyone who asks. They worry about everyone else first, and self-care is last. I knew a lot of these people when I was a nurse. The issue here is the belief that they have to give and not receive. Try to give something to one of these people. They grow really uncomfortable, and most of the time, they'll give you some excuse as to why they can't receive whatever it is that you want to give them. It could be a helping hand, a gift, a listening ear. This type of character is validated by helping others, not by receiving. But this characteristic is dominating this person. We have many aspects to us, all of which we are free to express. But when one characteristic begins to dominate, like the tireless helper-savior, we quickly lose our balance. And this affects our health. This affects our ability to care for ourselves. So much of our confidence and esteem is the balance between giving and receiving. My grandfather was an energy healer. In his studies of hands-on healing as well as distance healing, he understood the necessity for balance. He told me something once that I never forgot. He said, "Kate, when someone gives you something from their heart, always take it and say thank you." His advice was simple, but it helped me to understand that when someone wants to give me something, I'm actually giving to them by receiving it. This is reciprocation. I've experienced this myself. When I want to give someone something that only I can offer because I love them, or because I just want to help them, when they refuse my offer because they don't know how to receive, there's an imbalance created. My offer has no expectations and no obligations. I simply want to give. Under these circumstances, when I give and the other party receives, reciprocation has occurred. Now, if I give with expectations and conditions, I'm creating a power dynamic, and that will drain me faster than I can say potato chip. Reciprocation cannot occur when I have expectations and conditions. Let me give you an example. A really common situation I see is when parents give their children money. Oftentimes, there's a silent condition attached. That condition is, I give you money and you make my choices for you. Or, I give you money and you call me every Sunday. This is not a recipe for reciprocation, and this is only leading to a lack of confidence and possibly future resentment. In my opinion, developing a close relationship with your intuition while reciprocating in your relationships helps you develop your self-esteem. So much of our development and care for ourselves is in practicing balance. But a large part of balance comes back to listening to the quiet whisper in your heart. You can lean into this tiny voice for every decision in your life. The issue is that most of the time, the loud voice drowns out the whisper. The loud voice is often the fears and doubts, but also the rational thought, and the thought that, quote unquote, makes sense. A lot of us are so stuck on the right and wrongs of life. Am I on the right path? Did I make the right decision? Am I with the right person? What are your parameters for what's right? How far down the road do you want to see? Why not assume that you're always on the right path and that you are exactly where you need to be? Just because it's dark doesn't mean that you're in the wrong place. Just because it's loud doesn't mean you can't hear what's in your heart. It's in the darkness and the noise that our other senses come to life. It's in the darkness and the noise where we can't see and where we can't hear that our intuition shines. Take the opportunities to allow your body to guide you. Accept the fearful moments. Know that you are on the right path. Trust that quiet whisper in your chest. This is confidence. This is Kate Foley. Thank you for listening.